tossing you off, gets me off, like my lawyers when the fucking judge lets me off.
It is obvious. I am the chosen one.
HDPS, the most common, annoying, and misunderstood acronym used in Neverwinter. But does anyone really know what it means? I might have an answer. Roll it. Welcome back, friends, foes, and... Before we get into the video, let me quickly just say me and Gus Archer, another great content creator, discussed making this video on Discord and decided we should both make one, but make sure to watch his version as well. Link will be in the description. So what is HDPS? And what does HDPS really mean, and do you consider yourself to be one? If you answered yes, then you're probably not. But before I explain why, let's explain to the players who might not know or who are new to the game what HDPS actually stands for. HDPS comes from the word DPS. DPS is an acronym that means damage per second in multiplayer online gaming. It's used both as a noun, a weapon type, class, or a character capable of massive damage, and as an adjective to describe a weapon's capability. So when someone asks you what class you play, sometimes the answer can be a DPS or a DPSer instead of your actual class, which would be a warlock, wizard, rogue, ranger, or whatever else deals damage. But in reality, you're not a damage per seconder. You're a damage dealer that deals damage per second, and by dealing damage, you are considered a damage per seconder that deals damage because you in fact deal damage, so you DPS. But nobody's calling you a DDer that actually stands for damage dealer, because that just sounds like you have huge boobs. So as a DPS, you are in fact a damage dealer that inevitably deals damage per second, since time moves forward and stops for no one, thus seconds passes every time you deal damage. So you are in fact dealing damage per second, hence you are DPSer, because it would truly be weird if people were called damage per milliseconders or damage per hourers. Shut up, you get my point, don't judge me. So yeah, DPS means you deal damage. And that is as simple as it gets if it wasn't clear enough with that huge tongue-twisting brain fart I just provided you. HDPS, on the other hand, is a level up from DPS, meaning high damage per second. But oddly enough, players don't present themselves as HDPS or HDPSers when you ask them. Like if someone asked what class you play, you might answer, I play a DPS. But nobody ever answers, I play an HDPS. HDPS is very commonly used by almost every DPS at some point in their Neverwinter journey, and once they start, they rarely ever stop. And if you haven't used it yet, you probably will, or you have seen it in looking for group chat. Players who create groups for dungeons, trials, and skirmishes often ask for HDPS in their search and attempt to fill up empty spots in their party or groups. Asking for HDPS kind of serves as a filter to root out low-level, low-skilled, less experienced, or low-damage-dealing players. At least that's what they tell themselves. Because just because you ask for a HDPS doesn't mean you will get an HDPS. Also, that term excludes players from joining content and is a means for you to get what you need done without adding any noobs to your party. A supremely selfish term that divides the player base, and most guilds and alliances don't allow that term for good reason. Anybody can say they are HDPS, and most players who look to join groups will even advertise themselves as HDPS, so they can join groups and not be overlooked. I've seen players of all item levels say they're HDPS. Some players even go as far as asking for HDPS in zones while doing apes for Juma bags, or even in Avernus during hunts. Yeah, believe it, it happens. HDPS can be a useful tool on occasion, but also more often than not, it's a term which excludes players from joining in harder content, because they don't deal enough damage per second to be useful to the person who's creating the group or whoever. But anybody can baptize themselves as an HDPS. There's nothing to stop them, since there is nothing in the game that says, hey, you are HDPS now because you reach this much damage per second. And even if you use ACT as your measure for your DPS, it doesn't say you are an HDPS. Where does HDPS even begin? When can you consider yourself an HDPS? Literally, what the fuck is HDPS and what does it even mean? If you run with a pug group that has average gear, average companions, average skill, and average all-around everything because they are not at your level of grind, and you obviously end up dealing more damage than them, are you then considered an HDPS? Well, to them you are, and after the dungeon is complete, they might even gawk after you, compliment you, seek advice, or in extreme cases, praise you to the High Priestess of Tomorrow while sacrificing a golden goat companion to the Zen gods. Then you might run with a really skilled group and get outshined, outdamaged, and outperformed by one or more players. Are you then suddenly not considered HDPS? And why wouldn't you be, since you were HDPS a while ago running with those pugs? Do you suddenly not deal high damage per second? Where does HDPS truly apply? What is the measurement for it? What defines HDPS? Even if you use ACT as your measurement, as we said before, who decides at how much damage per second you are considered an HDPS? Because HDPS varies in all groups. For example, let's say you run with 5 different players who constantly end up on top of the leaderboards every time you have run with them. But if they end up running all together in a trial, they can't all end up in first place. So does that mean that anybody below first is no longer HTPS? Have they suddenly been downgraded to DPS because someone else beat them? Or are they still all HTPS? I personally have run into many players who advertise themselves as HTPS, and then I beat them by 100 or more million. I've also run into players who don't advertise themselves as HTPS and deal more damage than the players who did advertise themselves as HTPS. I think high damage per second or HTPSers do exist. I know tons of them myself, but they never advertise themselves as HTPS. HTPS can be translated any way players want, but in reality, if you look at the words in the acronym itself, it just means that, HDPS, which is high damage per second. So the problem here is we don't know where that damage threshold is where you can begin to consider yourself an HDPS. So realistically, we all know what the words in HDPS mean, but we apply different meanings to them. For some, HDPS could be an experienced player, which would make sense because an experienced player would know all the ins and outs of any content you run, thus dealing more damage because of that knowledge. In essence, HDPS is literally like asking for an experienced player. Most experienced players should or do deal more damage, but that isn't always the case because you can have an average damage output and still be experienced. There's a lot to the word HDPS and many ways to look at it. I'm just giving you examples in context in regards to the acronym HDPS and how it can be applied by the general public. For some, HDPS players are considered those who can carry you through any content due to the damage output they produce. They can make up for your slack or lack of damage and knowledge of the content you are running and push you through it. Overall, HDPS has some pros and some cons. HDPS will always be used by the player base as a tool because it is exactly that. It's a means to an end. Do you want to be picked over someone else or have a chance at joining a well-versed group at a specific dungeon? Then just say HDPS looking for boss. Do you want to form a group and fill up your free DPS positions faster? Just say looking for more HDPS. Sure, you can also use DPS, but they would prefer HDPS. Especially those groups who just want to breeze through content and don't want to risk failures, which do happen even in those groups, by the way. You know, the ones who use in quotations HDPSers, because a lot of them are not what they advertise themselves to be. It's happened to you too, hasn't it? You've seen it. You know what I'm talking about. The problem with HDPS isn't the meaning of HDPS, because if we just simply translate the words in the acronym for what they really mean, then it's clear what HDPS means. It's high damage per second. That's all it is. The problem is players use that term willy-nilly at any given moment for many different reasons, and sadly, mostly selfish ones. The term itself, even though it's meant to be a measure of damage being dealt, has become a tool of being included or excluded from content. Players also tie HDPS to gear for some reason. Sure, gear can help you deal more damage, but that isn't always the case. And looking at gear is where the excluding begins, because the person who is asking for HDPS for his group will most definitely most of the time inspect you for your gear. And if you don't fit his mold of HDPS, then you'll get a tell saying, sorry, I filled up already, or sorry, you're not strong enough, or whatever else. Real HDPS or HDPSers never call themselves that, except maybe a few window lickers, but who cares about them? I mean, they lick windows. For me, HDPS does exist. We just don't know at what point someone should be considered an HDPS, because the public, the player base, or community of Neverwinter have different opinions on the use and meaning of the term. And there is also no clear-cut threshold you need to cross to be an HDPSer. Maybe for some it means to be able to do trials or kill redcaps in Sherendar. Who the fuck knows? All I know is HDPS is hugely not allowed to be used in alliances and guilds because it excludes players who are new or who feel that they are not good enough. So stop using that fucked up dumbass word, people. It's stupid. Be inclusive. Help your fellow Neverwintonians, or Neverintians, or Neverwinterers, whatever, you get the point. So after all that has been said in this video, I think HDPS can be applied to many different things. It's literally just a way to open doors and get you into content you otherwise would have a harder time getting into. It can be used to show others that you have a huge pee-pee and a set of huge hairy balls.
With some big hairy balls, that's what you want. Look,
It can also be used to be carried or carry. Some people actually like to be carried and rather have an HDPS in their group. It can also be used to form groups faster or find experienced players. But for me, it doesn't need to be used at all. Just say DPS. That way everybody's happy. And if you are an actual HDPSer that deals high damage per century, then players will be even more starstruck, since they asked for a measly DPS and got a full-blown almighty supercalifragilistic expialidocious amazing incredible mind-blowing super huge PP HDPSer. Lucky for them. Time to sign autographs, you window lickers. Basically, it's just a tool and you're a tool for using it. Nah, just kidding. You're allowed to use it, but I surely won't, and I don't. And I know many others who don't either. So my final conclusion is HTTPS ultimately means huge dangly penis semen or horrendous dirty player socks. There, I solved the problem and I won the internet. And I also earned your sub and like, so go sub and like. Don't make me make you a meme or make you lick Windows. Love you all and thanks for watching. Galactic here. Peace out. Stay safe.